Don't bend the rules here. Where's the verification? Where's the policy code? If you don't have proof, leave the area, now.
Manhattan, Tuesday, 9:12 a.m. ET. A luxury lobby hums, then a receptionist blocks the woman in gray. Guests only. Phones lift. The black CEO sets her badge on the counter. Steady voice. Which policy? What evidence? Why only me? She doesn't argue. She taps the badge once. Log everything. 2 steps aside, 1 call. Ops, legal, do you want proof on system? The intercom crackles about possible fraud. The crowd goes quiet. She opens her folio, access email, CRM entry, time-stamped, on-screen text hits, access denied, proof loaded, record scratch, beat drop, we roll. Manhattan, Tuesday, 9:12 a.m. Eastern. The lobby runs like a metronome. Bell carts glide, elevators chime, a fountain keeps a steady hush. At the private check-in desk, a receptionist holds up a palm and blocks the woman in a gray suit from placing her folio on the counter. Guests only, she says. Staff is around back. A few heads turn. You can hear the pause that follows, the second where a room decides which story to believe. The woman does not argue. She sets her badge wallet on the counter so the camera can catch it. The badge is clean, the laminate unscuffed, the barcode unbent. She keeps her voice even. Which policy? What evidence? Why only me? Her tone is not loud. It is exact. The receptionist looks past her to security, as if volume could be borrowed from a uniform. One guard shifts a foot forward. A couple at the nearby couch lowered their coffee cups. Someone near the orchid display raises a phone, then another follows, and now there are witnesses from 3 angles and a mirrored column that will catch the 4th. Log everything, the woman says. She taps the badge once with 1 finger, not for drama, but for the timestamp. Then she takes 2 steps to the side, out of the line of guests, staying inside the frame of the security camera. She opens the folio. Inside are 3 items already prepared: a printed email thread with dates stacked like rails, a vendor profile sheet, a slim phone with a contact labeled Ops Legal. She presses call, no rush. She watches the receptionist the way an auditor watches a ledger, a line at a time. On the desk intercom, a voice breaks in with possible fraud at reception. The words travel across the lobby like a cold draft. One guest lets out a small laugh. Not unkind, more like disbelief. Another guest says, leave her alone under the breath and hold their phone higher. The receptionist squares up now, shoulders stiff, and points to a side corridor. Security gestures toward that same corridor, the universal move to make this disappear. The woman does not move. She listens to the line ring once and connects. On my mark, she says into the phone. Midtown property. Reception. Do you want proof of the system? Her cadence is clipped. Sentences that can live as notes. The receptionist slides the folio back across the counter with 2 fingers. It turns a 1/4 inch and stops at the woman's hand. Name and confirmation, the receptionist says. The woman keeps the folio closed for 1 more second, long enough for the camera to record who is touching what. She states her full name, then a project code, then today's audit window. She states them the same way a pilot reads a checklist. Security clears my throat. The couple on the couch exchange a glance that says, this is going to be something. Now the woman opens the folio flat. She sets the printed email on the counter. The top line is a subject with the property name and renewal trigger. Below that is a timestamp for 8:01 a.m. confirming access to the private floor. She places a phone next to it with the screen awake. The email displays there too. At the same time, the same thread, the same initials on the last confirmation. She holds the phone steady so the receptionist has to either read it or ignore it on camera. The receptionist chooses to ignore it. She steps back, lifts the desk handset, and repeats possible fraud into a second line. The lobby takes a breath. We see a junior staffer pause by the luggage tower. He looks at the desk monitor, then at the woman, then back at the monitor. His eyes tell you he recognizes the name. He does not speak yet. He just stands where the CCTV will catch him reading the screen, a tiny safeguard against what the script of the day might try to become. The woman's call is still live. Copy that, she says to Ops Legal. I am making a record. Access denied without cause. Public corridor, multiple witnesses, possible misuse of intercom, requesting mirror to lobby display on approval. She does not raise her voice. She does not switch to anger. She remains in that narrow lane where facts stack and feelings cannot claim the lane. Phones tilt higher. The hum of the fountain seems louder now. The guard who took one step forward does not take another. The receptionist shifts weight, tucks a stray paper under the keyboard, and clicks something on the screen. The woman watches the hands, not the face. Hands tell the truth in a lobby. A guest asks if everything is okay. The receptionist answers yes in that bright tone that means no. The woman answers, "We are finding out." She sets one more item on the counter. A single page with 3 lines. Terminate. Freeze. Log. It is not a threat. It is a workflow. It sits there like a fork in a road. The camera can see it. The guests can see it. The receptionist can see it, and for a part of a second, her eyes stick to the middle line. The woman ends her side of the call with standing by. She keeps the phone in view. She aligns the email and the page so the header and time codes are level. If you were making a training film for standards, this frame would be the cover shot. Nothing flashy, no raised heartbeat, just a record being made in plain sight in a building that sells the promise that everything here is in order. The lobby clock clicks to 9:15. She stands at a slight angle to the counter, not blocking traffic, within the field of 2 cameras and a mirrored column. Her folio stays open but tidy. Inside glide sheets show an audit window set for today, a renewal trigger tied to staff research completion, and a contingency line that reads, "Funding pause if conditions unmet." No one in the room knows those lines yet. They only see paper and a phone and a woman who does not flinch. She had landed at LaGuardia an hour earlier, hand luggage only. The morning plan was simple. Verify access to the private floor. Meet ops for a walkthrough of service standards and ADA compliance items. Spot check desk scripts against policy, including how to escalate without public spectacle. Then quiet meetings with the GM and finance about quarter close, vendor performance, and a contract renewal that routes millions through this property group every season. Nothing dramatic. The drama arrived on its own. She is not here for status. She is here for standards. Her work habits show it. Every name she speaks carries a code. Every code ties to a policy. The folio holds copies not for show, but because paper under glass cameras beats memory in any dispute. She keeps a strict timeline. She notes 9 to 10 denial at reception in her phone. She notes 911 intercom misuse. She notes 912 witnesses present and recording. She does not embellish. She records. Across the desk, a junior associate watches the screen that lists VIP arrivals. His eyes flick between the name on the queue and the woman in gray. The title on the screen reads Board Rep. He understands what that means, but he is new enough to doubt himself. He hesitates. Then he moves 2 feet closer to where the camera can see both his face and the monitor. He is building his own record by accident, but it will matter. Security holds the line near the orchids. They have not touched her. They have asked for a phone, and she has declined with correct language. She states that personal devices are not surrendered without a warrant or a property policy clause. She asks to see the clause. No document arrives. She remains still. Still is not passive. Still is a position when the facts can find you. On her call, a calm voice confirms receipt of her notes. The voice asks if the property consented to mirroring proof to a lobby display. She answers that consent will be requested on site when an operations lead arrives. She will not force a scene. She will let the system choose a lane. That is the whole point of audits. You do not win by force. You win by making the system show its shape. Behind the desk, the receptionist taps the keyboard with quick, clipped strokes. She reopens a profile, ticks a box that reads guests only, and adds a remark. The screen shows the time code. She does not realize the junior associate is watching the same log from a side terminal. He can see who changed what at which minute. His hands hover over the keys. He takes a breath and captures a screen image into the training folder with a neutral file name. It is the first brave act of the day, and it looks like office work. The elevator doors open and close and open again. Guests pass. A child points at the fountain. None of that affects the line at the desk where two stories are forming. In one story, a customer is difficult and staff protects the brand. In the other story, a gatekeeper is misusing a small lever and the brand is about to pay for it. The difference will be decided by what lives on the system. She reviews one more page in her folio. It is an email from last night with a route of escalation and phone tree, with initials from legal and ops, and a line at the end that says, "In case of denial, proceed to verification in public view." That is not theater. That is accountability. Public view is not to shame, but to create witnesses in a place where memory shifts and logs do not. A guest asks if she needs help. She thanks them and says, "We will resolve this shortly." She does not look at her watch. She looks at the clock above the elevators because the camera sees that clock. Later, a reviewer will be able to match the seconds. Her posture is the posture of someone building a case in real time and making sure the record has angles. The junior associate clears his throat. He says he thinks there may be an error in the profile flag. He says the name is on a list for VIP access tied to an audit. He does not use titles. He does not say CEO. He says audit because audit is neutral. The receptionist waves him off without looking. He steps back, but not far. He stays where the monitor is visible to the camera. He has chosen a side. He has chosen the side of the log. The clock clicks to 917. The receptionist chooses the loud path. She lifts the desk handset and repeats the phrase, "Possible fraud at reception," this time adding a request for immediate removal. Her voice carries just enough to reach the marble and bounce. A few guests flinch. Security shifts again, not closer, just visible. The way presence can be used as pressure without a word. The woman does not answer the phrase. She notes it, 917 second intercom misuse. She keeps the phone line open. Ops Legal stays silent on her end, listening, building their own record. The receptionist asks for identification again, but not the items already offered. She asks for a personal ID unrelated to the booking. The woman answers with policy, language. Identity is verified by the contracted access list, the email of confirmation, and the on-site lead. She sets the printed email higher on the counter so it clears any clutter in frame. The junior associate looks at the second monitor. He sees the log entry that flagged guests only at 910 and a remark added at 916 that says, "Refuse to comply." He knows the order is wrong. He knows refusal did not happen. She asked for a policy. He breathes out and saves another capture to the training folder, a time block and the initials of the staffer who edited the profile. His hand shakes once. He stops it on the edge of the desk and keeps going. At 918, a short tone sounds from the woman's phone. Ops is recording. A voice says, "Clear and even. Do we have consent to mirror proof to a lobby display for verification?" The woman looks at the receptionist. She asks for an operations lead or duty manager to authorize mirroring. The receptionist says, "You cannot display private materials here." The woman answers, "The materials are contract communications between brand and property. Verification protects all parties." She asks again for a lead. Silence fills the half second where a person can de-escalate or perform. The receptionist performs. She says, "Since you refuse to leave, security will escort you out." Security does not move yet. One guard knows a camera when he sees 5. He angles his shoulders away from the woman and toward the receptionist, a quiet cue that someone else should speak first. A guest near the fountain says into their phone, "I think she has documents." Another says the badge looks real. None of these are dramatic lines. They are small pieces that belong to a system when it is working. The woman tilts her folio so the badge and email sit square in the lens. She states, "Again, which policy, what evidence, why only me?" Her voice does not change. She adds, "For the record, I am a contracted auditor for today's renewal window." She does not add her title. She does not ask anyone to guess. She does not give the receptionist a new target. She keeps the target on the record. From the back, an elevator opens and the operations director steps out with a tablet and a lanyard. She scans the lobby fast, takes in the posture of security, the phones, the printed email, and the face of the receptionist. She does not ask what is happening. She asks, "Who initiated the guests only flag?" The receptionist answered that it was there. The junior associate says softly that it was added at 9:10. The operations director hears the time before she hears the name. Good, she says. Times first. The woman turns her phone slightly so the operations director can see the live call and the subject line of the last email. The director nods once and says, "Consent to mirror is granted." She points to the lobby monitor near the concierge desk. A second later, the screen shows the email thread, top line confirmation of access, bottom line a note about public verification if denied. The time codes stamp the corners in white. The room gets quiet in the way rooms do when a display speaks. The receptionist says, "You cannot show internal emails." The operations director answers, "These are the properties sent to the brand consented by ops." She asks the junior associate to bring up the CRM log for this guest profile. He does. The monitor splits to show two panes: left pane, confirmation thread; right pane, profile edits with time, user initials, and the guest's only toggle flipped at 9:10. There is no code that can explain that sequence cleanly. The sequence explains itself. At 9:20, the woman says into the phone, "I am proceeding to verification. Please note that public mirroring has been authorized." She looks at the operations director and asks to preserve camera footage from 9:09 to present. The director answers already cued. The guard who had shifted his foot now shifts it back. He is relieved. The shape of the system is becoming visible, and it will hold him too. The receptionist's face pinches, then smooths. She tries a new lane. She says, "We have to treat all guests the same." The woman keeps her eyes on the documents. She says, "So do I." Then she rests one finger on the line that reads, "Renewal trigger." The word hangs there as the next minute arrives. The clock reaches 9:22. The operations director steps to the counter and asks for the room to hold. She does not raise a hand. She uses her voice the way a good manager does, as a break. She asks the receptionist to log her presence. Then she asks security to document their positions and actions from 9:09 to now. The guard with good instincts nods and starts a note on his phone, the kind with timestamps you cannot edit. The air changes. People recognize when someone is building a file. The woman keeps her posture neutral. Phones still live. She states for the record that an operations lead is present. She restates the purpose of visit for today: audit of service standards and access verification tied to a renewal trigger. She identifies the relevant artifacts by type and time. Printed thread at 8:01 confirming access. CRM profile flag at 9:10 marking guests only. Intercom phrasing possible fraud at 9:17 with a request for removal. She does not accuse. She stacks facts. The operations director turns the lobby monitor to a cleaner layout. One pane for the email confirmation, one pane for the CRM log, one pane for the access control system where badge permissions are synced. The junior associate stands near enough to answer quick questions. He looks pale but steady. He says the CRM shows that the profile was edited from the front desk terminal with the receptionist's initials. He does not look at the receptionist when he says it. He looks at the screen like a technician reading a gauge. The receptionist tries a new defense. She says that the guest refused to provide proper identification and became disruptive. The operations director asks for the exact time that refusal occurred and which clause was cited. The receptionist names a minute that does not exist in the logged sequence. The operations director waits a beat, then asks the junior associate to scroll the log. There is no such entry. The absence sits there flat and cold. The woman asks permission to speak 3 short points. "Granted," says the director. She speaks to them slowly, one breath between each. First, identity in this contract is verified by the access list and the on-site lead. Second, denial without policy reference is a training error. Third, repeated use of fraud language without evidence is a liability and a breach of standards. She stops. The sentences are not sharp, they are precise. A new presence arrives at the edge of the scene. A senior finance manager from the property group pulled by the call tree. He clocks the monitor first, then the folio, then the fact that ops is mirroring to a public display with consent. He knows what that means. He knows the trigger that sits behind an audit when a renewal is timed to a site visit. He does not speak over ops. He listens. The operations director asks the woman if she intends to proceed to the private floor after verification. Yes, she says. And if verification fails for any reason, she will note a condition unmet and inform brand counsel that funding pause language might be invoked pending recertification. She says might as a courtesy. Everyone who knows the contract hears will in the space behind the word. Security loosens another degree. The guard who had been quiet adjusts his stance so he is no longer a wall. He asks the director if his team is needed at the desk. The director says, remain visible, no contact, cameras rolling, preserve footage on request. It is the plain script of accountability. It tells the room that there will be no more theater. The receptionist presses her case one last time. She says she has seen fake documents before and that it is better to be strict than sorry. The operations director answers that strict is policy-led and that sorry is for stories told without logs. She asks the receptionist to step aside while she reviews the guest profile directly. The receptionist freezes for half a second, then slides to the left. The chair gives a small squeak that sounds like a stage cue. The junior associate provides his captures from the training folder. The operations director reviews them on her tablet. Time code at 910. Toggle switched. Remark added at 916. The sequence holds like a rail. The finance manager exhales. He knows they are past the point of plausible mistake and into the realm of misuse. He is already thinking in remedial training, incident reports, and what the brand might do with leverage. The woman asks that the property acknowledge the confirmation email on the monitor as valid and that access be restored immediately. The operations director says, acknowledged. She taps a command. The access control pane refreshes. A green indicator lights next to the badge ID. There is a soft chime from the private elevator bank. It is the smallest sound in the lobby, and yet it turns heads. Even strangers know what green means. The woman does not move toward the elevator. Not yet. She waits for the record to catch up with the moment. She asks the director to note that access was denied from 910 through 922 against a written confirmation of entry. She asks to preserve the intercom audio and to log that guest devices recorded the sequence. The director confirms. The monitor shows a short list of preservation actions, each line stamped. The finance manager finally speaks. He asks quietly if this will affect the renewal window. The woman answers that outcomes are performance-based. She says standards are the product. She does not mention numbers. She does not need to. The word product does enough work. The clock rolls to 9:24. The facts are lined up. The file has a spine. The lobby feels like a room that has remembered itself. The woman closes her folio halfway and waits for the next step, the one that tells a brand whether it will behave like a system or like a story. The clock slides to 9:25. The green indicator holds. The private elevator waits with its quiet light. She still does not move. She is not here to win a ride upstairs. She is here to repair a system in public view. For the record, she says, I will proceed once 3 items are complete. First, acknowledgement of wrongful denial. Second, restoration of profile without remarks. Third, preservation of all logs and intercom audio. The operations director nods and begins to capture the items on her tablet. Her tone is steady. Acknowledged. Restoring profile now. Preservation request queued. She turns to security. Note the times. Keep cameras rolling. The guard answers with a yes. That sounds relieved. The receptionist folds her arms. She says, this is unnecessary. The operations director does not respond to that. She asks for the receptionist's initials and shifts the desk terminal slightly so the camera will see who is logged in. The junior associate stands to the side with the training folder open. His screen shows the same initials. He looks like someone who has chosen a path and intends to stay on it. A soft ping arrives on the woman's phone. Ops Legal confirms receipt of the mirror and the preservation list. The message includes a line the camera can catch if it needs to. If conditions unmet, initiate contract safeguard per renewal memo. She does not read the dollar figure aloud. She does not need to. The finance manager reads it in his head and feels the room tilt 1 degree toward consequence. At 9:26, the operations director asks the receptionist to step into the office for a short review. The receptionist refuses and says she needs to protect the desk. The director says the desk is currently protected by 3 cameras, 2 guards, and the truth. She adds that the junior associate will cover the terminal for the next few minutes. The receptionist hesitates, then slides away, leaving the chair slightly turned. The junior associate takes the chair, logs in with his credentials, and opens the access pane so the green indicator remains visible to the room. The woman turns one page in her folio. She reads without drama. Today's agenda was to verify access, review service scripts, and confirm recert dates. She looks up. We are going to keep that agenda. However, I will also open an incident ticket with compliance and note a temporary funding pause for this property group pending recertification. She says it slowly, like a checklist item. The finance manager swallows and asks what pause means. She answers it means payment pipelines move to pending until standards are verified. It is protective, not punitive. He nods because on paper that line is true and also because the timing is terrible for his month end. She asks the operations director to identify the duty manager and the general manager by name for the record. The director provides both. She asks for an email address to CC on the incident ticket. The director provides a distribution that includes compliance and legal. The woman dictates a subject so the camera hears it. Midtown property, incident denial without cause, public verification completed, preservation active. The words are not angry, they are parts. They slide into place. The junior associate speaks for the first time in full voice. He says the CRM has the guest listed as owner representative with today's audit window. He adds that he can see who changed the flag and when. He looks at the operations director when he says it. Not at the woman, not at the crowd. The director thanks him and tells him to attach the captures to the incident file. He does it in 3 clicks. It looks like an email. It is actually courage. She requests one more item. A brief statement to guests in the lobby that access has been restored and that the property is committed to standards. Not an apology, she says, just the truth. The director nods and steps to the concierge mic. She keeps it tight. Access has been verified. Thank you for your patience. The lobby exhales, a few phones lower. A child laughs at the fountain again, as if the building has remembered its job. At 9:28, the woman finally steps toward the private elevator. She pauses half a pace short. She asks that the director note that she is proceeding upstairs under protest until recertification is scheduled. She adds one line for the ticket. Please route temporary funding pause to the property group controller. The finance manager tries not to blink. He knows pause is leverage, and leverage is the language that brands hear over everything else. She presses the elevator call. The doors open. She has not stepped in yet. She finishes the scene where it began, at the counter, with the facts arranged in view. For the record, she says the denial began at 9:10. Proof was presented and mirrored by 9:20. Access restored at 9:22. The incident ticket opened at 9:27. Temporary funding pause initiated at 9:28, pending recertification. She lets the numbers hang. They are not adjectives, they are anchors. Then she says the quiet line that tells the whole building what comes next. I am here for standards. She steps into the elevator and turns to face the lobby so the camera can read her eyes. The doors close on the green light that has been waiting the entire time. The elevator rises without music. She watches the floor numbers and the small reflection that proves the camera sees her. At the private floor, a door opens onto a quiet lounge. A staff member at the desk looks up, sees the badge, and says welcome in a tone that belongs to training done right. The operations director steps out behind her and signals to a meeting room with a wall display. The finance manager follows, already texting his controller. Inside, the room is simple. Table, screen, a small panel for mirroring, and a binder labeled standards. She lays the folio on the table and aligns the pages. The director connects the phone to the display with a tap. The email thread appears, then the CRM pane, then the access control pane with the green light captured at 9:22. She asks to add one more window for the incident ticket. The director opens a template. The subject line is already there from the lobby. The body starts building itself as she dictates clean sentences. Denial without policy stated. Intercom language used twice, citing possible fraud. Profile flag changed at 910 with initials visible. Access restored after on-system proof at 922. Preservation of lobby cameras requested. The general manager arrives a minute later, breathing short from the elevator and the text messages. He stops as soon as he sees the display. He reads the subject line and the green indicator and the words temporary funding pause. He pulls a chair without asking and says, proceed. She does. She asks him to acknowledge that the confirmation at 8:01 was valid and that the denial contravened training. He does. She asks for the date of last recertification. He gives a date that is outside of policy. The finance manager closes his eyes for 1 second. The operations director writes it into the ticket verbatim. She shifts to the walkthrough plan that brought her here. Service scripts for front desk escalation, ADA compliance hot points, quiet handoffs for VIP floors. She asks the director to read the exact clause that covers denial decisions and to point to the required triggers. The clause is clear. A denial cannot be based on vibe or a personal judgment. It must be tied to policy, credential, or safety. She highlights that line with a fingertip. The room does not argue with text that sits on screen with a timestamp. Her phone buzzes once. Ops Legal has pushed a short note. We are ready to draft a funding pause memo if needed. She keeps the phone flat so the camera reads that a choice is in play. She asks the general manager to describe what corrective training would look like and how quickly he can schedule it. He says 48 hours for the front desk team, 72 for managers. She asks for names. He lists them. She asks for an external moderator to be present. The director agrees and names a partner they have used for bias and policy misuse research. She nods. She is building a ladder out of what just happened. The junior associate from the lobby steps in with permission, carrying a small tablet and a look that says he knows a moment when it arrives. The director invites him to speak. He explains the captures he saved and how he put them into the training folder with neutral names. He says he did not want to embarrass anyone, only to keep a record. She thanks him and asks if he will be willing to be recognized as a truth keeper in the file. He goes red and says yes. The general manager writes down his name with the quiet focus of someone who knows he almost lost a good employee to cynicism. She brings up the renewal trigger in the contract. It ties continued funding and loyalty redemptions to recertification in good standing. She reads the sentence and then reads it again, slower. The finance manager asks if pause means the entire property group or only this location. She answers that the default is the group and that scope can be reduced with evidence of containment. He nods because this is leverage and also a map. He is already thinking of steps they can take in the next 3 days. At 9:34, she states the path forward as 3 parts. Restore access and complete the walkthrough as planned. Initiate recertification with an external moderator and preserve all relevant logs. Issue a funding pause notice to the group controller with a path to lift upon verified completion. She looks at the general manager and asks if he accepts the plan. He says yes. The operations director says yes. The finance manager says yes and adds that he will brief his regional head. She asks the room to commit to plain language in any guest communications. No apology, scripts that dodge the point. A simple message that access was restored and that the property follows standards. She asks for a follow-up meeting later today to review what the cameras captured and to set the recert dates. The director blocks time on the calendar for 2 p.m. She approves of it. She closes the folio 3/4. She is not finished. She turns to the general manager and asks for a private minute after the room clears. He understands. He dismisses the others with thanks and a tone that has lost some gloss and gained some spine. When the door clicks, she speaks at the same pace she has used all morning. This can be a fix or a lesson you repeat. Choose now. He says, fix. She nods once and slides the incident number across the table like a key. The clock reads 9:36 when the door opens and the room fills again. The general manager has changed his posture. He starts with the part that matters most. He acknowledges that the denial contravened training and that the intercom language was inappropriate. He asks the operations director to open a staff review file and to place the receptionist on paid leave pending investigation. He says the words in a tone that is steady, no spectacle, just a procedure. She notes the acknowledgement in her incident ticket. She asks for the exact names on the review panel, the expected timeline, and the policy references that will guide the findings. The director provides the panel names and cites the bias and policy misuse sections from their handbook. She adds the clauses to the file and timestamps the commitment. Then she turns the screen so the camera reads the entries cleanly. At 9:37, she calls Ops Legal back and gives a 2-line update. Access is restored, investigation and recert are in motion. She adds that a temporary funding pause will be initiated at the property group level with a path to lift when the recert is complete and findings are closed. She does not bargain. She does not raise her voice. She lets the contract do the talking. The finance manager texts his controller and regional head. He adds the words temporary pause and pending recert in a tight message that will be screenshotted before noon. The operations director begins building the recertification calendar on the display. Day 1, front desk scripts and escalation flow. Day 2, managers on decision logging and incident narration. Day 3, a joint session with an external moderator on policy and bias. She asks the general manager to confirm attendance and coverage for the desk. He confirms. The junior associate raises a hand and asks if he can sit in on both the script review and the logging session. She says yes and marks him as shadow lead for documentation. The line truth keeper goes next to his name in the incident file. At 9:38, she asks for the loyalty redemption status tied to the group. The finance manager admits that a sizable number of points are slated to be burned this month. She asks him to draft a memo that states redemptions will continue at other properties while this location undergoes recert, and that any disruption here will be compensated with upgrades elsewhere. He nods. He understands brand math. He understands that fairness on paper can keep a story off a headline. They move to the last open thread from the lobby, public clarity. The general manager proposes a short statement for guests on the ground floor. She edits in real time. Access was verified. A process error occurred. The property is conducting immediate training and preserving records. Thank you for your patience. No adjectives, no claims that do not live inside a log. The operations director agrees to read it herself and to post a follow-up on the property's app and screens. At 9:39, the receptionist knocks once and steps halfway in. Escorted by HR, her eyes flick to the screen and the words paid leave. HR keeps the moment humane and brief. They explain the review, the right to respond, the preservation of pay, and the prohibition on contact with witnesses. The receptionist signs a receipt. There is no scene. She leaves with HR and a copy of the policy pages she had just tried to improvise around. The room exhales and resets. The operations director pivots them back to the original purpose of the visit. Walkthrough. She and the black CEO tour the private corridor, the room set aside for VIP check-in, and the service station where scripts live in plastic sleeves. The CEO points to 3 scripts that need edits. One line conflates demeanor with risk. Another suggests a guest can be asked to surrender a device without a policy clause. A third buries the escalation path in a paragraph. The director marks them in red and adds them to the secret agenda. It is not punitive. It is maintenance. At 9:41, they return to the meeting room and review the call tree that moved finance into the loop. The CEO asks the general manager to send a courtesy note to the insurer that a non-injury incident was recorded and preserved. She has learned that quiet notices prevent louder ones later. He agrees and drafts the note on his laptop so the camera sees him work. Her phone buzzes. Ops Legal has prepared language for the funding pause notice. She reads it once and nods. It is tight. It states that payments are paused for the group pending recertification at Midtown and verification of sister properties. It lists the documents preserved and the sessions scheduled. It gives a target date to review the pause in 7 business days. She asks the finance manager to confirm receipt and to reply with a plan to lift. He says he will and that he will send a staffing roster to cover the desk while training runs. The junior associate lingers at the door. She thanks him for stepping into the camera's line with the monitor. He says he did not want anyone to get hurt. She says he did the thing that keeps people safe. He goes pink again and nods. The general manager asks him, in the plain tone of a manager who has learned something today, to present a 10-minute segment at the training on how to narrate actions while you work. The associate says he can do that. At 9:43, the black CEO reviews the agenda for the afternoon. She will sit for 30 minutes with the data team to check access sync between CRM and the badge system. She will sample call recordings for escalation phrasing. She will walk the ADA path through the lobby to the elevators. She will sign the incident ticket after the files are attached and the recert calendar is live. None of these are punishments, they are standards. She closes the folio and looks around the room. She has not raised her voice all morning, and she will not start now. She says the line that makes the rest of the day simple: keep the record clean. The general manager holds her eyes and says, "We will." The operations director says the same. The finance manager adds that the pause memo will be in inboxes before noon. The junior associate says he will be at the desk to help cover and to keep the log straight. They stand. The room has a plan and a clock. The elevator will take her down in a minute, but the work she came to do has already started to live in the systems that run the place. That is the point. Not a speech, a standard, a record that will hold when the next minute arrives. The elevator takes her back to the lobby at 9:45. The room has shifted. Phones are lower. The concierge screen holds the last frame of the mirrored email. The operations director stands near the mic with a short statement ready. The general manager moves to the desk, not as a shield, but as a witness. Security keeps their distance and their notes in view. The junior associate is at the terminal, the green indicator still steady. She returns to the same spot at the counter where the denial began. For continuity, she says. The camera should see the arc. She asks the director to read the statement. The director keeps it plain. Access was verified. A process error occurred. The property is preserving records and initiating training. Thank you for your patience. The words land without spin. A guest nods like the building has told the truth. At 9:46, she opens her folio enough to pull a single page and a phone screen. The page carries the incident number and the research calendar draft. The screen shows the funding pause notice prepared by Ops Legal. She asks the finance manager to confirm the controller's inbox and the distribution. He recites the addresses. She reads the subject line aloud for the record. Temporary funding, pause at group level, pending research completion, Midtown. Then she sends. The phone gives a small sent tone. The camera catches the time. A minute later, the controller replies. The reply adds a request for scope. She answers in one sentence. Default scope group, potential reduction to site with evidence. This is not theater, it is architecture. The pause moves through the vendor portal and marks the payment pipeline pending. The finance manager watches his laptop refresh and sees the status change. He says, confirmed. He does not like it, but he respects it. She asks the general manager to pull up the loyalty module. He does. She has him draft a banner that reroutes redemptions to sister properties during recert and offers upgrades for disruptions. He types with care and reads it back. She approves. The director pushes it to the app and the lobby screens with a badge icon so guests can find it later. It is a small thing that prevents a larger complaint. At 9:48, HR returns from the office with the receptionist. The escort is calm. HR states that the receptionist is moving to paid leave and that a review panel will meet within 72 hours. The receptionist signs a receipt that lists rights and obligations. No one raises a voice. This is what accountability looks like when handled by adults. The receptionist does not like it, but she can see the log. She goes with HR without a parting shot. The room does not applaud, it just moves on. She turns to the junior associate and asks if he will accept a temporary assignment as documentation lead during recert. He blinks, then says yes. The general manager adds a small stipend and a title for the next 2 weeks. The operations director logs it on the incident ticket as aftercare. The word stays simple. It means the system saw who kept the record straight and decided to reward that behavior. At 9:49, she calls Ops Legal for the last step at lobby level. She requests a preservation order to the property group covering front desk terminals, intercom audio, and lobby cameras from 9:09 to 9:30, plus any edits to the CRM during that window. She asks that IT lock the relevant user accounts until the panel interviews are complete. The order goes out with a case number that populates on her screen. She reads the number aloud so the footage can tie it later. The guard with the good instincts writes it down in his notes too. Redundancy matters. The general manager briefs the front desk staff who have gathered at a respectful distance. He keeps it short. Service continues. Scripts are under review. Do not speculate. Do not edit logs. Direct questions to the director. He looks at the woman and waits. She adds one sentence. Standards protect you. Use them. It is not a slogan. It is the entire morning in 4 words. A guest walks up and asks if the private floor is open. The junior associate answers yes and gestures with the smallest movement possible. The guest goes on with their day. That is the point. The building returns to its job. The memory of a scene becomes a record instead of a rumor. At 9:50, she steps aside to the same patch of floor where she made the one call. She makes a second to a board contact who handles ethics audits across the brand. She provides the incident number, the actions taken, the pause sent, and the recertification plan. She asks for a quiet review across sister properties for any similar toggles or intercom phrasing that could hint at a pattern. The contact agrees and gives her a time window for a preliminary readout before close of business. She thanks them and ends the call. She faces the general manager and operations director and says, what happens next is simple. Complete the walkthrough. Stand-up training. Close the findings. When you are ready, ask to lift the pause with proof. The manager nods. The director nods. The finance manager nods with a face that says he will not sleep until the roster is built and the memos are sent. She closes the folio fully this time. She glances at the clock and at the camera above the clock so that later no one will have to guess when the room changed shape. Then she turns toward the private elevator. Not to claim a perk, but to finish the work she came to do. The green light waits. The lobby hum returns. The system, for the moment, is aligned. The clock turns 9:52 when she steps into the small operations lab behind the lobby. It is a glass room with 2 terminals, a badge reader, and a screen that mirrors the property's systems. The data lead is waiting with IT on a call. She asks for a quick sync test. Her badge taps the reader. The access pane returns a green light and a user line with her ID. She asks them to replay the sync from 9:05 to 9:25. The graph shows a clean heartbeat until a dip at 9:10 when the guest's only toggle overrode the access list. She asks for a report that shows who initiated the override and what prompt the system displayed. IT says the prompt was a manual flag with no policy reference. She asks them to add a required field in the next sprint. The data lead logs the request with a date. At 9:53, she moves to call recordings. She asks for the front desk escalation scripts that played in the last 30 days. IT pulls 5 clips that match a pattern. The phrasing in 3 calls leans on vibe words not supported by policy. She marks them. She tells the director that any script with mood language needs rewrite. She adds a line to the recert plan for a legal review of templated phrases. The director writes it in with a time to deliver by Friday. They walk the ADA path from the front entrance to the elevator bank. She notes a planter that narrows the corridor by an inch beyond spec. She notes a rug edge that could catch a wheel. She does not lecture. She dictates 2 maintenance tickets and asks for pictures and timestamps when fixed. The general manager texts engineering and asks for a same-day correction. He includes the incident number so the fixes live under the same review. At 9:55, her phone buzzes with a short update from the board contact. A preliminary scan of sister properties shows 2 minor incidents with intercom phrasing and 1 access flag that was later reversed. She asks for those incident numbers and for the local teams to preserve logs through the end of week. She is not building a scandal. She is closing a seam. The contact agrees and schedules a late afternoon call to compare notes. Back at the counter, she thanks security for keeping distance while the record formed. She asks the guard with good instincts to write a brief note of his observations and to attach it to the ticket. He nods and asks if he should include his first impression. She says, "Include only what you saw, what you heard, and what you did. That is how records stay clean." He writes it like a checklist and hands it to the director to scan. The finance manager returns from a fast huddle. He has the controller's acknowledgement and a request for a path to lift the pause in 5 business days if milestones are hit early. She says the milestones are clear. Recert scheduled and attended, scripts corrected and approved, logs preserved and reviewed, guest communication posted, incident findings signed. He writes them down in order beside the words, path to lift. It is a ladder that both sides can climb. The general manager drafts a note to staff that will be posted on the internal portal. He types while she watches. The note explains that an audit revealed a process error and that training will address it. It states that staff who raise concerns in good faith will be protected and credited. It does not name the junior associate, but it describes his act and why it mattered. She nods after each sentence. He posts it with a timestamp. The act will travel farther than any rumor. At 9:57, she asks to test the vendor portal as a guest would. She opens a tablet and navigates to the loyalty redemption page. The reroute banner appears with the upgrade offer. She tests the link to sister properties and the contact option for assistance. Everything loads. She says this is what fairness feels like to a guest and to keep the language for future incidents that affect service. The concierge notes it for a playbook entry. HR sends a quiet message confirming the review panel calendar. The first interview is set for tomorrow morning. She asks them to include a question set on decision logging and to avoid why you feel. Ask, what did you see? What did you cite? What did you record? HR replies with a yes and adds that the receptionist will have a representative present. She says good and means it. Fairness is a habit, not a pose. At 9:59, she returns to the same square of floor where the story bent. She looks at the clock again so the video will stitch without guesswork. She gives the director her closing note for this phase. Verify, preserve, recert, communicate, resume. The director repeats it back. The general manager repeats it too. The finance manager says he will send the pause notice to regional property heads with the path to lift on page 1. The junior associate says he will sit at the desk until noon and keep narration on every action. She checks the folio, slides the incident number to the front, and signals the work is moving into the quiet part where systems do their jobs. The lobby hums like it did before, 910, but the file that did not exist at 909 now does. That is the difference. The building will be remembered with logs instead of stories. She turns once toward the camera and says, the line that keeps audits simple, keep standards visible. Then she steps out of frame to let the day continue. At 1001, the board contact calls back with a short agenda. Confirm the pause, set the scope, define the lift path. She steps into a quiet alcove where the camera still sees her and answers point by point. Pause is active at group level. Scope may narrow to site with evidence. Lift requires recert completion, script corrections, preserved logs reviewed, guest communication posted, findings signed. The call lasts 2 minutes. There are no flourishes, only verbs that move money and policy. She returns to the desk and asks the finance manager to open the vendor portal that handles operating funds. Together they watch as the status line beside the property group flips to pending under review. She asks him to add an internal note that links the incident number and the recert calendar. He does it while she reads the sentence aloud for the record. The portal pings an alert to regional finance heads. Somewhere on another floor, an inbox updates and a meeting gets pulled forward. This is what leverage looks like in a system. Quiet, logged, immediate. At 1003, the insurer replies to the courtesy note. They appreciate early notification and request copies of the lobby footage and intercom audio. She asks the operations director to route the media through the secure channel and to tag each file with the time window. The director confirms and assigns IT to the upload. The guard with the good instincts signs his observation note and hands it over. She thanked him once. He looks steadier than he did at 917. Procedure has that effect when it is visible. She meets the concierge at the screen where the banner for Loyalty Reroute now lives. A guest asks if their points will still work next week. She answers yes at sister properties and that this location is in recertification to protect service quality. The guest nods and says that sounds fair. The word fair is doing work for the property that ad copy cannot. The camera catches the exchange and the timestamp in the corner of the screen. At 1005, HR sends the interview question set for the review panel. It follows her instructions. What did you see? What policy did you cite? What did you record? No lines about mood or gut. She approves the set and asks HR to include one more item. What would you do differently with the policy in front of you? It turns a lesson into a tool. HR agrees and pushes the final set to the panel calendar. She calls the data lead to the lobby and asks for a chain-wide crawl for the guests only flag when used on profiles marked owner rep, board rep, or audit. The data lead estimates a quick scan by this afternoon and a deeper pass by the end of week. She asks them to surface any instance where the flag preceded a denial without a policy code. This is how patterns become visible. The director notes that the scan will inform training at other sites. The board contact pings back a thumbs up. The icon is not the record. The log of the request is At 1007, the general manager finishes a staff briefing in a back room and returns with a printed outline for the next 3 days. He offers to read it into the camera. She nods. He states the schedule for scripts, for decision logging, for external moderation, and for follow-up checks on ADA path and access sync. He names the junior associate as documentation lead during recert. The associate blushes and then grows into the role a notch. It is visible the way a straight spine is visible without being mentioned. She checks her folio and flips to the renewal trigger page. The line that ties funding to standards sits in plain type. She reads it once more in her head and then sets the page beside the incident ticket. She is not threatening anyone. She is showing the map. The finance manager understands that the map is also a clock. Every hour the pause holds, someone calculates a cost. He says he will have a lift packet ready if they hit the milestones early. She says, good. Make the lift as clean as the pause. At 1009, a comms rep from the property group arrives with a draft statement meant for media if the lobby videos surface online. She reads the draft and removes adjectives until only facts remain. A process error occurred. Access was restored. Training and recertification are underway. Logs and footage preserved. She hands it back and says, this can sit in a drawer and never be used if the building lives by the same facts in front of guests. The comms rep accepts the edit and saves the file with the incident number in the name. She does one last lap from the entrance to the desk to the elevator bank. She checks that the planter has been moved and that the rug edge is taped until engineering fixes it. She photographs both with timestamps. She drops the photos into the ticket. The elevator gives its quiet chime. She does not ride it. The morning has been about making the ground level honest. She stands where she can see the clock, the camera, the monitor, and the people who work here begin to move the day forward inside better lines. At 1012, she gives the simplest closing for this phase. Standards restored, systems in motion, funding paused until proof. The operations director repeats it, the general manager repeats it, the finance manager repeats it, the associate writes it into the incident file as the line that marked the turn. She lifts the folio, checks the badge, and leaves the lobby to the people whose job is to keep it as calm at 1012 as it was supposed to be at 912. The building hums. The record holds. The next step is not noise. It is work. At 1015, the pause begins to ripple. Regional Finance copies the incident number into a tracker and tags 4 sister properties under the same group. Their dashboards turn a thin gray where green used to be. It is not punishment. It is a hold that asks for proof. Controllers in 2 cities reply with received and requested scope. She answers the same way each time. Group by default, narrow with evidence, lift on, recert completion. The language stays identical so the record stays clean. At 1018, the data lead sends a first pass on the guests only flag across the chain. 3 locations show flags within the last quarter tied to profiles marked board rep or owner rep. 1 was corrected on scene, 1 resulted in a manager override, 1 shows no resolution. She asks for preservation orders on those windows and for local ops to mirror proof if any denial occurred in public view. The board contact adds the incidents to a shared list with dates, times, and staff initials. A pattern is not declared, a pattern is tested. At 1021, the property group's regional head requests a call. She sets it in a visible corner of the lobby where the camera can see her posture and the monitor behind her. She walks him through the steps without tone. Denial without policy reference. Intercom language invoked twice. Profile flag added at 910. Access restored after mirroring proof at 922. Incident ticket opened. Funding paused, pending recert. He asks for a way to limit exposure. She gives him the path. Book the training. Fix the scripts. Preserve the logs. Place a public note for guests. Close findings. Send a lift packet. He says, copy. At 1024, procurement pings with a checklist. They need to know if any vendor deliverables depend on the paused funds in the next 7 days. She scans the schedule. Supplies and routine services continue. Capital items wait. She writes a line that will prevent noise later. No vendor penalties. Shift dates with notice. Procurement echoes it in their system and sends amended POs with new delivery lines. The pause is firm. The pause is not a hammer. At 1027, a union rep for front of house staff asks whether the review process will be used to discipline broadly. She answers no. Review is focused on decision logging and policy use. Training is paid time. Good faith reporting is protected. She sends the staff portal note the general manager posted and highlights the section on protection. The rep replies, "Thank you," and adds that clarity helps. She saves the exchange for the ticket. At 10:30, the insurer confirms the secure upload received. They request the intercom audio clip where the phrase "possible fraud" was used. Ops sends file names within minutes and seconds. She notes that the clip will teach better than any poster. She asks the operations director to use it in training sessions as a do and do not with the policy clause on screen when it plays. The director agrees and adds it to the agenda. At 10:33, the comms team asks if a public statement is required now. She says no. Keep it ready, live by the facts in the lobby, push the app banner, fix the ADA path, post recert dates where staff can see them. She has learned that rooms stay calm when the next step is visible. The concierge watches her list and writes a simple sign for the back office. Verify preserving recert communication resumes. At 10. 36 Legal sends the draft for the funding pause notice to sister properties. It matches the Midtown memo with only names changed. She approves and requests a single change. Add a line that Truth Keepers will be recognized and that neutral documentation will be credited in performance reviews. The board contact replies approved. It is a small line. It is how cultures shift from fear to standards. At 1039, the data lead flags a second seam. The CRM allows a remarks field to be saved without a policy code. She asks for a hot fix to make the code required whenever a restrictive toggle is changed. IT estimates today for the prompt, next sprint for a clean UI. She asks that the prompt include which policy did you cite and where it is logged. The phrasing is plain on purpose. It tells the user that there is a mirror. At 1042, she checks the training roster. The junior associate is listed beside 3 sessions. He will shadow and record. She adds a short note that his documentation will be reviewed for clarity and that he will receive credit. The general manager signs it. The associate stands a little taller. It is not a theater. It is reinforcement. At 1044, a regional operations VP appears on a call tile. She keeps it tight. Are we looking at a local problem or a signal? The black CEO answers, we are looking at a system with a gap that lets bias hide as procedure. The fix is technical and cultural. Require codes, mirror proof, narrate actions, reward documentation. The VP asks for 1 page. She answers that the incident ticket is the 1 page. Everything else is a copy. At 1047, she reviews the recert calendar. External moderator confirmed, scripts marked for rewrite, ADA fixes scheduled, preservation orders active, lift path written with milestones. She writes a short status on the ticket, systemic fallout contained, remediation underway. Scope may narrow with evidence at sister sites. She signs the line with her initials and the time. At 10:50, she steps back to the spot where the morning bent and looks at the clock so the record stays seamless. She says the line that keeps the work from turning into blame. This is policy, not personal. Then she turns to the operations director and asks if the floor is ready for the afternoon walkthrough. The director says yes. The lobby hums. The files live where stories used to, the system has a spine, and the day can proceed. At 1052, the hallway outside the operations lab is quiet enough to hear the soft tick of the wall clock. She asks the general manager to bring the junior associate to the glass room for a brief recognition. He arrives with the tablet he used earlier and a look that mixes pride and worry. She keeps it simple. Your choice to stand where the camera could see the log mattered. We recognize you as documentation lead during recert with a stipend for 2 weeks. The general manager adds that the role includes shadowing all sessions and drafting a plain language recap after each one. The operations director notes it in the incident ticket, so the credit lives in the file, not just in the air. At 1054, she asks the director to open a small template labeled Truth Keeper Acknowledgement. It contains 3 lines, what the employee did, which risk it prevented, how the organization will reinforce the behavior. She dictates the lines, captured on system evidence of a profile change, prevented escalation and preserved proof, reinforced through role assignment, training, credit, and mention in performance review. The director drops the text into the ticket and adds the employee number, so payroll can attach the stipend without delay. The associate breathes out in a way that reads as relief, then steadiness. At 10:56, the board contact sends a short note asking if an external partner should be invited for the research sessions. She answers yes and names a civil rights and service quality group they have used before. The operations director places the call and books a moderator for day 3. The confirmation lands with a timestamp and a rate card. Finance approves the rate in the same thread, even under a pause, because training to remove a risk is itself a control. At 1058, she returns to the ADA path to verify the quick fixes. Engineering has moved the planter and taped the rug seam. She photographs both, again with the clock visible, and drops the images into the ticket. The general manager schedules a permanent trim for the rug and a floor plan update for the corridor. She asks him to log those with dates, so there is a clean before and after. He does it because the images will someday stand in front of someone who is not here, and they will need to see the difference. At 1100 Legal pushes the chain-wide prompt update. Anytime a restrictive toggle is changed on a guest profile, the system will now require a policy code and a short narrative to be entered before the change will save. The pop-up will ask which policy did you cite and where is it logged. IT confirms the prompt is live at Midtown and will roll through the group by end of day. She asks the data lead to set an alert if anyone tries to change a toggle without a valid code. They wire an alert to ops and to her board contact for the next 30 days. It is a small tripwire that will keep small levers from doing large harm. At 1102, the finance manager brings a draft of a lift packet cover page. It lists milestones with checkboxes, research sessions completed with attendance logs, scripts corrected and approved by legal, preservation orders fulfilled with file manifests, guest communication posted with screenshot, findings signed with dates. She adds one more line, Truth Keeper recognition recorded. The manager eyes the line, then nods. He understands that culture is a control and that controls belong on checklists. At 1104, HR circulates the final interview schedule to the panel. The questions are the ones she requested. What did you see? What policy did you cite? What did you record? There is a line that offers an opportunity to add context without speculation. She approves it and asks HR to include a reminder that retaliation for good faith reporting is prohibited and monitored. HR adds the reminder and logs it to the incident number. It will be hard to misremember this later. At 1106, she asks the comms rep to rehearse the plain guest statement once more so the camera will hold a clean version. The rep reads the 4 sentences without decoration. A process error occurred. Access was restored. Training and recertification are underway. Logs and footage preserved. It lands the way clear sentences do, with weight and no heat. The lobby feels like a room that understands what happened and what will happen next. At 1108, she steps back to the front desk and watches the junior associate handle a guest question about the private floor. He answers with the script she wrote in the lobby. Yes, access is open. We are conducting recertification to protect service. If you need assistance, we will route you quickly. She nods at the cadence. It is the sound of a system that has learned to narrate instead of improvise. At 1110, the board contact pings with the 3 sister property incident numbers found in the scan. She requests preservation orders there as well and offers to loop in those local teams with today's moderator for a shared session next week. She approves and adds a note that Lift at Midtown can proceed independently once milestones are hit, even as other sites complete their reviews. The pause at one site will not be held hostage by another if evidence supports a narrower scope. Fairness applies to systems too. At 1112, she writes a short paragraph into the incident ticket labeled Aftercare, promote the Truth Keeper, recert with an external moderator, hotfix restrictive toggles with required codes, preserve and review logs, communicate plainly to guests and staff, align finance pause with milestones. She signs the paragraph with her initials and the time. When people ask what the fix was, this will be the answer. Not a speech, a list that got done. At 1114, she closes the folio without a rush. The morning that began with a denial at a counter has produced a file with a spine and a plan with dates. She looks once more at the clock where the camera can see her do it. Then she says the same sentence she has used to hold this line from the first minute. Keep the record clean. The director echoes it. The general manager echoes it. The finance manager echoes it. The associate writes it on the small whiteboard behind the desk where only staff will see. The lobby hums. The system breathes. The day moves on in straight lines. At 1130, the building slips into its steady rhythm, and the file keeps working. Engineering sends a photo of the rug edge trimmed and the planter moved with permanent markers on the floor plan. She adds both to the ticket with a note that fixes it. The insurer acknowledges the secure upload and confirms the claim remains informational only. She writes that line into the status so it does not become gossip later. The concierge checks the app banner one more time. It holds. Guests reroute with clarity and upgrades in plain type. At 1210, the finance manager returns with a first draft of the lift packet. He has the check boxes and the signatures boxes waiting. She asks him to add one more page for evidence snapshots. People believe what they can see. He attaches stills of the mirrored email, the CRM flag with timestamps, the access control screen with the green indicator, and the ADA fixes. He writes a caption under each with a time and a source. The packet is becoming a story that tells itself without adjectives. At 12:40, lunch moves through the lobby in quiet lines. She takes a short call from the board contact and confirms that sister properties receive preservation orders and will mirror any proof if issues surface. She repeats that Midtown's lift is independent once milestones are met. The contact agrees and sets a window at the end of day for a brief recap. She ends the call with the same words she has used since morning, standards visible. At 130, HR confirms the panel is set for tomorrow with a neutral room and a recorded note that retaliation is prohibited and monitored. She asks HR to provide each participant with the policy clause packet before they answer a single question. She knows memory changes shape when paper enters the room. HR replies and places the packet in the shared folder tied to the incident number. At 158, she is back in the meeting room with the operations director, the general manager, the finance manager, and the junior associate. The wall display shows a 4-pane view, email confirmation, CRM log, access control, CCTV clips from 909 to 930. They watch without commentary. They let the minutes do the work. The intercom phrase lands twice in the audio and no one speaks. When the montage ends, the general manager says, "The only useful sentence available. The record is clear." He signs the interim findings with the time. The operations director countersigns. The associate initializes the documentation section. The finance manager adds the pause notice and the lift path to the back of the packet. At 2:12, she asks the room to read the 3 lines she carried into the lobby. Terminate, freeze, log. The termination is already in motion as paid leave pending findings. Freeze is live at group level with a path to narrow when evidence allows. Log is the spine of the file that now includes proof, fixes, training, and preservation orders. She says the only addition is the lobby. Recognize the truth keeper. The general manager nods and writes a brief commendation for the personnel file. It will outlast any memory of the scene. At 2:20, the external moderator dials in to confirm the session plan for day 3. They will play clips, read policy text on screen, and practice narrating a denial with codes and citations. There will be no role play with feelings, only actions tied to clauses. The director agrees and blocks for 2 hours. The moderator asks for permission to anonymize this incident into a case study for the brand after findings close. She approves with one condition: keep every claim tied to an artifact. At 2, 3, 5 procurement posts, amended delivery dates, and confirmed no penalties. The controller replies to the pause notice with a plan to hit milestones within 5 business days and to submit the lift packet on day 6 if early. He adds that he understands the pause is protective. She writes that phrase into the record because it marks a culture turn. When finance speaks that way, systems harden in the right direction. At 3:00, she walks the lobby one last time with the operations director. The desk has a new calm. The junior associate answers a guest with the script that now sits in a sleeve beside the terminal. The guard with good instincts returns to a steady stance that looks less like a wall and more like presence. The general manager stops by the fountain and says the quiet part out loud. We were sloppy. We will not be again. She nods once. Words matter when they match a log. At 3:10, she hands the general manager the incident number on a small card and says, the lift lives in your hands now. Finish recert, correct scripts, preserve and attach. Read the guest note daily until the habit is muscle. He says, understood, and offers a handshake without ceremony. She takes it and moves back to the square of floor where the day began to bend towards standards. At 3:15, she gives the final lines for the record. Verification complete. Preservation active. Training scheduled. Funding paused with a path to lift. Truthkeeper recognized. Sister sites under review. She looks at the camera next to the clock and adds the sentence that closes the file without drama. This is policy, not personal. The operations director echoes it. The general manager echoes it. The associate mouths it to himself, like a line he will remember the next time a moment asks for courage. She leaves the lobby the way she entered it, with a folio that now carries a spine, and a building that now carries a standard. Outside, the street is loud. Inside, the hum is honest. The video will end without a speech. The last frame will be a clock and a caption that says, what the work has said all day. Keep the record clean. If you have receipts of a process used to humiliate, bring them. We will fix the system.